You may think, well, I've overlooked an important part of happiness here, and I haven't talked so much about work and money and that whole, I guess, economic dimension of our lives. So we can get into that, but at least here I want to give you a couple principles and talk about money. So let's start there. So there's a bit of conflict when it comes to the relationship between happiness and money because, and I think it was 2010, Daniel Kahneman, and I think the last name was Kruger was the other guy, but you can double check me on the reference. They found that the relationship between money and happiness kind of had diminishing returns. So think about it. If you give me $20,000, I'm like, this is awesome, let's go, I'm happy. If you give Jeff Bezos $20,000, he doesn't even notice. And so what he found is that around $75,000 in annual income, it kind of started to level out. And it's not that more money was a bad thing, but it just didn't do that much, especially for your experiences of happiness. Now that number in 2025 dollars is roughly $108,000 in annual income. But here's the conflict. A guy named Matt Killingsworth, I'll show his graph. So he found that the relationship between money and happiness keeps going up. Like as you make more and more money, you just keep getting happier. But here's the thing. Killingsworth used a logarithmic scale, which means as you look at the amount of money you make increasing, it's not going up by, 5,000, 5,000, 5,000. It's continuing to exponentially increase. So it's like if you're making $100,000 and then you double your salary and then you double it again. And if you're making $200,000, all of a sudden you're making $400,000 and so on and so forth, that we see some moderate increases in happiness. Now here's my take on this. I don't think that's a very practical thing because most of us aren't going through life thinking about, well, maybe I should just triple my income in the next couple years, right? It tends to be a more linear scale where we're thinking about, should I take this new job that might be more stressful or in a new city and I'll make $15,000 more dollars? Or, should I work overtime so that I make a few extra $100? And so when you actually adjust Killingsworth, his scale, to increase linearly, it looks more like that hockey shape pattern. I'll actually sketch this out. So again, around $108,000. It's not a bad thing. More money's great. If you have an opportunity to double your income, please take it. But it just starts to level off. So the lesson here is money, when you aren't making enough to feel quite comfortable, money does buy happiness. But beyond that, once you get to around, let's say 6 figures in 2025, enough to be comfortable, depends where you live, your family setup, etc. Once you get to that threshold, money buys more of an opportunity for happiness. So depending on how you use it, how you invest it, it may lead to some boosts, but generally you should maybe at that point start to prioritize other sources of happiness like your physical health, mental health, and relationship health. So wanted to at least touch on money, and I'll very briefly touch on some of the scientific literature about happiness at work. There's several, lots of theories out there. One of the most well-validated is self-determination theory, which means the happiness you have with your work will come down to meeting 3 psychological needs: relatedness, competency, and autonomy. Relatedness is that you have some social connection. There's a data point from Gallup that I often share when I speak to business leaders and military leaders too. People who say they have a best friend at work are 700%, 7x more engaged in their work. Engagement is a measure of commitment, enthusiasm, and interest for one's work. So having relationships and genuine social connection at work is important. Competency, that means that you feel a sense of self-efficacy, that you kind of know what you're doing at work, you feel yourself getting better, and you're starting to build some mastery over certain skills. One of the biggest predictors of burnout is when you feel like you're just not actually in control or able to move the needle on certain things, and you're stagnant and you're doing all this stuff, but it's not actually leading to anything. So we want to cultivate that sense of competency and efficacy. And then autonomy. This just means that you have reasonable amount of flexibility over how you get the work done. You're not being micromanaged. Maybe you can work from home sometimes. Maybe you feel like your boss, instead of saying this is exactly what you're going to do, says here's the results we want, get them in the way that's best for you, right? So the extent that you can have some control over your own way of working, it goes into it. So think about, to the extent possible, how you could cultivate those in your current role, or Move towards a role that gives you more of those three things. Okay, so that's our basic here, work and money discussion. Of course, a lot more we could cover there, and I have resources for that too.